What's going on there, guys? Good afternoon. It's the Earthmaster here on the live stream on this beautiful Sunday, August 7th, 2022 date, about 2:55 p.m. West Coast time here in California. Latest quake shows a 3.7 here on the Earthquake 3D globe, right around the Java Trench area, right there in the green flag. We have seen some earthquake activity overnight, kind of ramping up off the coast of Japan as well. Let's go ahead and check out the latest activity here from the USGS map showing the continental states there, but we're going to check out around Japan first. We're on the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench, seeing a 5.8 overnight. Actually, earlier this morning, this originally came in as a 6.1. Pretty good downgrade right there. We haven't seen too much activity in this region for a while. I have been chatting about this area for quite a while now in my updates for possibly seeing some larger scale movement up there. So it looks like we're kind of advancing in that direction. Also to the south, we've seen a little bit further deep movement here into the kind of looks like around the northern end of the Japan Trench here, about 54 kilometers for a 4.4. That one occurring shortly thereafter, the 5.8. Also some other quakes here around the Japan region, also in our swarming area around the Izu Trench. So just a heads up, keep an eye on that region. And for the most part, a little activity kicking up here around the Java Trench as well, a 4.9, and of course that 3-pointer that we've seen on the Earthquake 3D globe within that area. Around the Papua New Guinea region, we did see some activity late last night out there around this area, and also some movement down into the Tonga Trench region. Looks like let's see when this came in. Earlier this morning, we had a 4.8 at almost 600 kilometers. Now that's a super deep earthquake there, and it looks like, let me see when which was first here, 1342 and 1340. Wow, okay. So only looks like only 2 minutes following that 5.8 up here north of Japan. That's when we seen that deeper earthquake here near Fiji at 1342. So just about 2 minutes for that to make a little effect here along this area of the plate. Some subsequent movement up here, 5.8 at 35 kilometers, and then we've seen some adjustment 2 minutes later, deeper activity down dip. And I think if anything, that should be applying some further pressure in this region of the Kermadec Trench, Tonga Trench area, and not to mention this area up here along the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench. So watch those areas pretty closely. Along the Aleutian Islands here, Aleutian Trench, seen quite a few earthquakes, including a 4.6. This one coming in earlier this morning as well. Looks like that occurred shortly after the activity in Fiji and the movement off the coast of Japan. So it looks like we got a little sequence of events kicking up here around the Pacific Plate in general. Just goes to show you how the domino effect can play a part in a specific part of a plate system thousands of miles away. Around the South America region here, got a little bit of earthquake activity. Most of this was from last night. We did see a 4.6 into the Peru area, somewhat shallow there at about 10 kilometers. Looks like around the mountainous areas up there to the Peru region. This activity down south, the deeper movement here, was from last night. As far as the Puerto Rico swarming goes, looks like things have kind of mellowed out a little bit. We haven't seen too much activity here within the last couple hours or so. Majority of it was overnight into the southwestern portion here of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico Trench and the rest of the Caribbean Plate looks pretty quiet as far as the 4.0 and above goes. Looks like there's not a lot to report in that region. Eastern portion of the country, of the states, of course, one earthquake from last night kicking up there around the New Hampshire region, 2.0. Got some activity kicking up in Texas. This one was overnight as well, 3.9 and a 2.6. So a lot of older activity as we head east of the Rockies region. West Coast activity somewhat active. We're not seeing a whole lot of earthquake movement. Again, I do note that when we see a lot of activity ramping up here along the western Pacific, it tends to temporarily relieve activity out here along the eastern portion of the plate, which would be the western states here. So not a whole lot to report out here aside from the very typical microquakes. That's always going to happen, very common. But then again, there's not a whole lot of them, just up and down the board, pretty much scattered all over. Little bitty swarming out here around the Santa Rosa Mountains area. Looks like that is just off of the San Jacinto fault zone, the Anza section, Clark fault. But a lot of times we do see some swarms down here in this area. And for the most part, what do we got? 1330. Most of this activity was prior to the 1342 event, which was the earthquake around the Japan region. So activity just completely dropped off here following that 5.8 in Japan. It just kind of goes to show you the pressure differences here. One earthquake around the Imperial Fault, just off of it within the last hour, of 1.2. But overall, if you look at the 2.5 map and above, not a whole lot at stake here. Everything's pretty below that threshold. We did have a 2.6. That was prior to the earthquake activity in the Japan region, the Kuril-Kamchatka region, with that 5.8 earlier this morning. So things kind of temporarily on hold for now, but we'll see how that adjusts throughout the day and the evening. The Big Island of Hawaii does play a part in this as well. It tends to, I find it anyway, it's in that middle part of the teeter-totter effect here. I tend to see Hawaii kick up quite a bit when the West Coast is active. And for some reason, it tends to go quiet as well once we see a lot of activity ramping up here along the western portions of the Pacific Plate. Not a lot of activity here on the Big Island. This is very typical earthquake swarming since the early 60s or so. Read up on it. The Pahala earthquake swarm been going on for quite some time. So to see this 17, 18 earthquakes or so in a 24-hour period is very typical. No major swarms to report around Mauna Loa or the other volcanoes throughout the Big Island. Kilauea still doing its thing with continual eruption there confined to the crater. Let's see what we got far as the movement up into the Pacific Northwest. There's not a whole lot being reported. A couple small earthquakes prior to the 5.8 that struck in Japan earlier. So things just kind of taking a temporary break along the western portion of the states. Not a whole lot going on throughout the Mediterranean or the Middle East. We did see a couple fours throughout the region. One earthquake out here in the Mid-Atlantic area. Southern Mid-Atlantic, a 4.8 at 10 kilometers. And I believe this one here, it looks like that 4.8 kicked up about an hour or so before the one off the coast of Japan. So a little 4.8 in the South Sandwich Islands region. Yellowstone National Park. I was watching this swarm last night, kind of kicking in a little bit. Looks like this morning time frame, we've seen a couple more earthquakes showing up here. These are going to be these earthquakes right here, well defined on the map. There's a good 3 or 4 of them, it looks like. But compared to last night when we seen that swarming really kick in here around Maple Creek, we had a pretty good spitter spatter of earthquakes in a short amount of time. USGS not reporting them. They will be reported, I'm sure, tomorrow once a seismologist or the scientist up there in charge gets to look at it. But yeah, a little bit of earthquake activity within the past few hours, mostly confined here to the Maple Creek area, Purple Mountain region. Now, if you notice, there's a pretty good blip here on the seismograph stations across the majority of the park. If you look at this timestamp here, between 1330 and 1430, it puts it about 14. Let me see here. What the 1340. See this time stamp here? 1340 UTC time. So we go over here and check this out. 1330. Of course, got to remember the distance here from the 5.8 to Yellowstone is going to show up a few minutes later from the S waves kicking up here. So that's kind of what we've seen. That is the 5.8 signature that kicked up in Japan earlier this morning. Again, that did show up across a good portion of the park. I like to compare those timestamps just to make sure, and that's kind of what a distant large earthquake looks like. If you've ever seen, remember last year we had a couple 8-pointers, and man, that shook the seismograph stations pretty awesomely throughout the park there at Yellowstone. It was a broad signature, But again, those large earthquakes can do that not only at Yellowstone, but across seismograph stations across the globe. Tremor map last night was somewhat active, almost 200 epicenters, mostly confined up here to the Pacific Northwest, kind of towards the northern end of the Cascadia. Nothing kicking up down south here. We'll see what that looks like a little bit later on tonight. Another kind of a interesting thing popping up is some solar weather activity. Unforecasted, unexpected for the most part here when it comes to the 3-day geomagnetic forecast. We weren't really expecting any major uptick, but we're seeing that kind of kick up here around the KP index of 4 over the last, or throughout the morning and somewhat overnight time frame. Things been kicking up with a good southward tilt of the interplanetary magnetic field, allowing some solar wind stream to flow right in and create these conditions that we're seeing today. And it looks like they are forecasting that over the next 3 days or so. I know we did have a coronal hole facing us. It is now kind of facing away from us, or turning away from us, but that should amplify, at least the wind stream here should amplify some of these conditions that we're seeing throughout the next couple nights or so. These guys, when was this put out? Looks like earlier this morning. An enhanced solar wind stream containing sectors of southward BZ, is kicking up geomagnetic activity at higher latitudes. A minor G1 geomagnetic storm watch was added and will be in effect until the 23:59 UTC time of today. So looks like extended warning was put out here by the NOAA folks, I should say. Now valid. Yeah, looks like a G1 minor. We'll see if we get up there around the KP index of 5. Right now we're still at the 4 level, but that could definitely change. There is the southward tilt of the solar wind stream coming in from the with the interplanetary magnetic field, kind of towards the south. And of course that wind stream really kicked up last night. We watched it. It's up there around the 550 range there right now. And of course everything's somewhat elevated there when this stream flows in. Density, as far as the particles go, and the speed can help kick the auroras up at the higher latitudes. So yeah, lucky folks at the higher latitudes, right? Not here in California, unfortunately. Solar flare threat remains very low at the moment. Only a 40% chance of a C flare, and the sunspots are just not all that awesome looking. I mean, we got some growing out here around the northeastern limb. 3074 is looking large, but I don't think that it's all that complex for producing any type of major flare. We can only hope that it kind of gets its act together, and maybe we'll see some good sized flares coming up here in the coming days, but we'll see how it goes. All right, guys, I'm jumping off here. Have a good day. Stay safe out there. We will chat you guys a little bit later on. Have a good one. Peace out, folks.